Hi everybody, this is Eric Johnson. This month marks the second year that I've been doing the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt. I've done a number of trips out west looking for the Forrest Fenn treasure. Went to Colorado a few times. I've been out now to the Madison River area. That's where I'm going to return in September. I'm going to be going out there to visit a museum or two. My last video was a little off-putting in that, you know, I was upset about the fact that Forrest Fenn had a number of anecdotes where he would, in interviews, he would talk to people about going out in the desert, and he discussed going out in the desert with his chest and being buried out in the desert with the chest and all that. Then I come across an interview where he just dismisses out of hand. He says, by the way, if you're looking in the desert, get a new solve. So that irritated me because for the obvious reasons, right? I mean, if you're spending your time, effort, and money to actually go around the country, and for a lot of us it means a plane ride or at least a long car trip, and you're literally assuming you could be in this part of a desert because that's where your clues lead you, and Forrest Fenn says in interviews that you've read that, you know, he might take it out into the desert. Well then, it's pretty irritating to just find him one day in an interview go, oh, by the way, it's not in the desert. You know, it's very irritating because, like I said, time, effort, and money, none of which are to be thrown away needlessly. And that's kind of how you feel. And what I didn't know was, when I did that video, I got some people said, you know, Troy Barlow was responsible for for Forrest Fenn saying in an interview, by the way, you know, don't go looking in the desert. That was because Troy Barlow was already looking in the desert, had discussed it to some extent with Fenn, and Troy feels, and I have no reason to doubt him from what I've read, that Fenn was talking to him in that interview, or others like Troy, when he said, by the way, you know, if you're out in the desert, it's not the solve. So Troy was irritated, rightfully so, because here he was, he'd already talked to Fenn through emails, I think it was a verse private message, whatever it was. And, you know, then he's out there, or he has a guy that works with him out there, and, you know, I think Troy was actually out there, if I read, because Troy contacted me about it. Some other people, like I said, you know, said Troy was responsible for that quote. And that's really good that Troy had prompted Fenn to say that, because it could still be distracting people that are looking out in the desert because of these, you know, there's one interview where Fenn says very clearly, you know, I could see just, you know, if my time comes and the cancer comes back, and I could see just going out in the desert with my treasure box and blah, blah, blah. And I think the interview is quite old, but very old, as a matter of fact. And these things are just all peppered throughout the internet. And we know how much, if you really want to study stuff, you can really find stuff, that old quotes, old interviews, and it just gets conflicting. And I was just looking at Blaze of Glory was talking about the same thing in a recent video that I watched of his. He does some good videos too. Troy does great videos. Blaze of Glory goes out to the Madison River area, and that's where I think it is. So I really like that particular take of his, that he goes out there and he shows a lot of the Madison River area, and I find that very cool because that's where I believe it is. And I'm going to be out there in September going to a museum, and it's funny, speaking of the museum, someone wrote me about this museum in the Three Forks area and said, oh, by the way, I've been there and there's nothing of value there. So it was very good. It was a very good comment. It wasn't putting me, you know, it wasn't nasty. He was just saying, yeah, I don't think you're going to find anything there because it's all local stuff. Well, actually, I was hoping to find some local stuff. So I'm still going there in September. I really don't expect to find a treasure chest. Forrest Fenn said a long time ago, this is going to be a lot of work for whoever finds it. And I'm finding it to be a lot of work. And a lot of people are finding it to be a lot of work. I'm not the only one, of course. I mean, there are people that have done so many trips compared to me. And I actually, quite frankly, I enjoy getting out of here once or twice a year. I guess it's coming to be twice a year. I enjoy just getting out here and going out to the Rockies. It's a cool place. What I'm going to talk today about, though, is Homer Brown. And it all goes back to my last trip when I went out to, not my last trip, my last trip when I went out to Yellowstone. Yellowstone was a wonderful place to go. It's a place very much a Fenn place. Yellowstone is is where Fenn spent every summer of his youth up until he went away to the Air Force, and spent every summer there, right in West Yellowstone, which is the town of Yellowstone is like smack dab pushed up against the west entrance of Yellowstone, and he spent every summer in there. He worked, I think he was applied for or was a trailblazer in Yellowstone. He was a professional fisherman at the age of 12 or 13. He was taking people around fishing all over through that area, the Madison, the Yellowstone, etc. Broke the rules sometimes, went into the park before the season was open, or it opened in the morning or something. He talked about a time when he would go down with his father before he was supposed to go in there, and they would elude the rangers. And so Yellowstone's a huge part of Fenn's background, and I'm convinced that this poem has to do with his years when he was very young in the Yellowstone Madison River area that he spent. He talks about Yellowstone being magical and stuff, and I think it made an indelible imprint on him, and I think someplace in the Madison River Yellowstone area is where his special spot is and where the treasure is. Having said that, about Homer Brown, when I was up in Yellowstone, what struck me about Yellowstone, outside of the incredible countryside, which unfortunately is so overpopulated now, everything you go to, it's almost like Disneyland. If you want to go see a geyser, if you want to go see a hot spring, if you want to go see any of these things, you have to just be in this mass of people, on these boardwalks that go around, but there's just tons and tons of people. It totally ruins it for me. I was out there in May, right? It was fairly cool in the afternoon. It was like in the 40s or 50s. I guess it was in the 50s, 40s, whatever. I thought, Yellowstone would be a midsummer thing. No, it's just like Disneyland. It's people just crowded in there from all over the world. I say that just from the ethnicity of all the people that were there and stuff, and so it's, oh, I get it. This is duh. It's an internationally known place, and it is packed. Apparently all the time, except maybe in the middle of the winter. And of course, some of the roads are closed in the winter. So actually, I think some of the big roads to get in there are closed in the winter. So anyway, that struck me, and that was sad. But the countryside itself is incredible. It's very magical. And I talked about how when I was there, because it was cool during the day, you would see a lot of the springs and the ponds and the hot ponds and stuff that maybe wouldn't be as noticeable in the daytime during the summer. They were smoking. So you just had this smoke all over the place, rising from different places around the park, not to mention the main places around the park, which are hot springs and geysers. So that was pretty cool. What else did I take away from Yellowstone? The other thing I took away from Yellowstone, and this may sound a little strange, was brown. It's very brown. The signs are all brown. A lot of the buildings are brown. I talked to one ranger. He got off a truck, and I was going into a restroom, and he was washing his hands, and I think his uniform was kind of brown, grayish. But again, I think he was very dirty and stuff. He was on a truck. I think maybe they were going to do some sort of land work around the area. But anyway, he was again brown. And I've got pictures showing here on the background. I was looking up this concept of brown at the National Park Service, and actually it brought up this a bunch of images for Catachin. You'll see it on here. It's some park. And then I've thrown in some other parks, but the color scheme for the national parks is brown, which that's kind of where that's kind of how I came away from it, you know. And another thing that's kind of interesting is that I don't know if people are aware of this, but back in the day, when I was younger, they actually had an advertising scheme, I guess you could say, or an advertising campaign for UPS. You know, UPS would have all the brown trucks. And the UPS would say, call Brown if you need a package delivered, you know, call this, you know, Brown will deliver it and have it delivered in a certain amount of time. So in this weird kind of juxtaposition of things, I kind of started thinking, what if Fenn in some way, as a kid or as a young man, maybe that him and his friends would think of the Park Service or the park as brown. And so I took this idea to the internet and I put in Brown, National Park Service, etc. And of course, it showed all these images of the brown color scheme that is part of the National Park Service. What I did not know was that that the government has colors for everything, and that some departments of the government actually have official colors. And for instance, the Department of Transportation has highway green. The post office has color 15095, that's post office light blue. This means they've actually taken certain colors and named them after government agencies or departments. And the Forest Service sign, 259, is standard brown. And I thought, you also have russet that is, oh, here's something that I came across looking at this on the internet. A friend's dad says cocoa brown is the color. The guy was talking about, does anyone know what the color is for the National Park Service? And this guy says, a friend's dad says cocoa brown is the color. I'm starting to think that's a new standard, but not the old standard. I need to take the time to talk to maintenance. And this is funny. It's the reason I included this. This guy writes back, find an old guy. It's always the old guys that know these things. I thought, well, the perfect. Forrest Fenn. He's an old guy. I mean that in the best sense. I'm an old guy. But Forrest Fenn knows about things like the color, the official color of the National Park Service. So the official color of the National Park Service is brown. I know some of you are going, oh, come on. Why not? It's an idea. As I said about one of the people who got on my case one time, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it was a comment, that's okay, it was a valid comment from his perspective. It says, you don't always introduce evidence. No, I don't have any evidence. I sometimes just introduce an idea. Is it that far out that for Forrest Fenn, who grew up outside the National Park of Yellowstone, and just bonded with it, I guess you could say, and it's such a huge part of his life. And I think he has said it's one of it's his favorite place that he's ever been to is Yellowstone. Yada yada yada. Is it that far out? Is it really even that far outside of the box to think for Fenn, the home of brown may refer to either Yellowstone or the Park Service in general? How would that work? I don't know. It might mean that home of brown refers to a park structure. We know that the treasure chest is not related to any structure. Related to, associated with, what if there is a river coming down through a valley from where warm waters halt, and there is some part of the Park Service, a cabin, a gate, Park Service has cabins they rent. And below that, at the river's edge, is where you put in, which normally in nautical terms refers to putting in a boat, or I suppose putting in yourself if you're wading into the water. It's just an idea. I find, is it inconceivable that that capital B is not referring to a species and not referring to a person, and not referring to a city or anything, or you know what I mean? That's kind of far out, but you know what I mean. Maybe the B is there precisely because it's trying to draw attention to the color itself. As in brown, the color is what I'm talking about. And we're talking about home of the color, and the color brown has a home in the National Park Service because it's the official color of the National Park Service. It's just an idea, folks. And one other thing I thought I should bring up since I got into this, and as you can tell, it's a pretty short video for me. As I was doing this, I came upon this. The most notable example of National Park Service graphic design is its arrowhead logo. Along with the ranger uniform, the arrowhead is the principal means by which the National Park Service is identified by the public. Obviously, why do I bring that up? Because we know how much arrowheads have to do with Fenn's collecting consciousness, if you will. He's mentioned many times how much it meant to him to find his first arrowhead. The arrowhead is the idea of arrowheads, finding arrowheads, the whole archaeological arrowhead evidence with American Native Indians that he is enamored with permeates his whole life. And I had always forgotten that. In fact, having just been out there, it wasn't until I was doing this research and I went, oh yeah, there were all these arrowheads all over the place. But you don't think about it because it's just part of the thing along with all the brown signs. But I did have the idea that, boy, there's a lot of brown going on out there in the National Park Service when you're driving around. So yeah, the arrowhead artwork is a big part of the National Park Service. But the main thing is Forest Service brown. Brown. Homer Brown, National Park Service. Just thought, folks. Everybody have a good day, and hope you're enjoying life, and hope you're enjoying the treasure hunt. Don't bother commenting if you're just going to say this is the wackiest idea I've ever had. It's just an idea. That's all. It's just something to percolate around for me. Everybody else can blow it off, or some people might say, oh, it's kind of interesting way to think of it. Nothing wrong with thinking of these things when you're, you know, if you have a solve, and in that particular solve, right where it comes to Homer Brown, you're kind of going, no, I don't really see Homer Brown, and suddenly you realize there's a park structure on the map near it. You might just say, oh, maybe that had something to do with it. It's just an idea. Nothing more, nothing less. Not evidence, not proof. Everybody have a very good idea. It's not what I meant to say. Everybody have a very good day and a very good time. And if you're out there looking, have a good time looking. And may your wind always be. And talk to you later. Thank you very much.